Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is a very important webinar at a very critical stage of our progress in Africa towards having an African Medicines Agency in place that will safeguard and help us develop and recover and build back better. As you know, one of the things that we as Africans have always been saying is that we do need Pan-African institutions that can bring us together and help us understand each other's position and help us work together. And these institutions are very important. I myself have seen the progress made in Europe to what was called the Project European Union, where whilst the governments worked together, there was much bigger project, and that was the project of creating those institutions, those pathways and groups and places and where we could talk and discuss and progress Europe. And one of the biggest forum that really united us was health. Wherever you go in Europe, when you sit down to have coffee or when you sit down to have a glass of wine or water, your host always says to your good health. So we know that good health joins us, and that's the thing that we're covering today. I'm very glad to have Margaret Agama-Anyetei today from the African Union. Margaret, to many of you know, has worked really hard on the Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development agenda at the African Union. And she has been the key architect, I think, of the continent's health policy landscape and shaping the response to pandemic. You might have seen Margaret repeatedly on your local TVs, and the face is very familiar because of that. I think we must thank Margaret for having really worked on our behalf and helped us progress this. So without much ado, as you know, Margaret has got a very busy day ahead of her. I will ask Margaret to start talking to us about where the position is of the African Medicines Agency, and then look at areas of what further needs to be done when it gets to be hosted somewhere and staffed, and then how we can work together with it. Margaret, could you take over and enlighten us? Thank you.
Thank you. Very good morning, and thank you for extremely kind introduction. And welcome to also all colleagues and partners and friends of AMA who have taken the time this morning to participate in this webinar. As you rightly introduced, following the decision of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government in February 2019 to have the AMA established, the treaty which established the AMA came into force on the 5th of November 2021, with at least 18 member states having ratified and deposited their instrument of ratification at the headquarters, the African Union headquarters. We actually needed 15, and by that time we had 18. It was a record ratification process demonstrating the interest of the AU member states in the establishment of the African Medicines Agency as the second continental health agency. Yeah. To date, moving forward, we have 22 ratifications which have been deposited, and these 22 members now form the Conference of State Parties to the treaty establishing AMA. This has allowed us to proceed to establish who will actually host the headquarters. It is currently in its ongoing competitive process. We had 14 expressions of interest at the beginning, and we, due to internal procedures and a few other matters and issues, we now are assessing 8 countries for the hosting of the headquarters. The final decision will be taken by the Executive Council in July of this year, and it will be based on a recommendation that comes out of the first meeting of the Conference of State Parties. So we're looking forward, and we hope a decision will be taken. The first meeting of Conference of State Parties would also consider other matters which will be related to the operationalization of AMA. The African Union Commission is supporting that process, because the AMA shall be established as an autonomous agency of the Commission, but a health agency of the Union. So I can stop there and take any other questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, Margaret, the first question somebody's posed here is, how can patients be engaged with this project? As you say, we have a saying, nothing about us without us. So do you have some kind of idea how we could look at? I know my colleagues, some are pointing towards Europe with their patient consumer working parties. What's your idea? What do you think will be, where will we find that niche in there? Thank you.
Okay, so by the treaty, AMA, as an autonomous agency, shall engage in its own relationship and partnerships. It will establish its own governing board. It has, first of all, it has the Conference of State Parties. It has its governing board. It will appoint its own director, and these will be the key bodies that will take decisions for and behalf of AMA. So at the moment, the Commission is only mandated by the Assembly to support the operationalization, and in particular, the determination or the assessment which would support the determination of the host country of the headquarters. What I'm trying to say here is that the Commission does not and cannot speak on behalf of AMA unless mandated to do so. And yes. So the decision regarding partnerships, how it engages in partnerships, whom it engages in partnerships with, and so on and so forth, shall be decided further down the line. And it will be the decision of the Director General, the Governing Board, and of course, with the overall blessing of the conference, its Conference of State Parties.
Thank you, I think you're right. As I was at the birth of the European Medicines Agency, I know it's similar, that the agency for quite some time, it was like an ivory tower, and we used to go every day there knocking doors in London, get us in. And therefore, you're right, the agency then does its own thing. It's no longer a child, it has to make its own relationship and live its own life. And that's the time I think we will be really defining how it works. It has to make its mark. Another question for you, I think, was that on the aspect of the other stakeholders, as you know, with the pandemic, we saw how important it was to improve clinical trials and that. How can the African academic group join in as well? And I suppose it will be the same answer, but it would be good to look at African universities who were looking towards registering trials at the AMA or helping them support advancing innovation in Africa. Any ideas or suggestions? Thank you.
So thank you for assisting me in already answering the question. Again, but that's clearly defined in the functions of AMA. And it shall be one of the most important functions of AMA. And therefore, once the structures are in place and they are settled down, they will clearly engage in the appropriate partnerships that will facilitate its implementing and meeting, responding to its functions as appropriate. So I don't expect that there should be any problem regarding the partnerships that AMA decides to engage with and with whom. And I'm sure that partnerships will be as strategic and appropriate to ensure that it can deliver on its functions.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, something that again, it's almost on the same question, but it's much more important. How will it work with the regional economic communities? How will that link go? How is the AU? And I'm sure you have answered it, that it will decide its own pathways, but how will AU and the regional economic communities work with AMA? Is there a idea or some blue sky thinking you could suggest?
Thanks again. Again, as guided by the treaty, the AU recognized economic communities, of which there are 8, will have representation on its governing board on a rotational basis. And so they would represent all the others. And given that we already have an existing regulatory program at the level of the regions, AMA again will do, I'm sure, not speaking on behalf of them, but 2 things. One, engage in its established partnerships with existing programs, and in particular would want to engage with the ongoing and existing AMRH program, which has been led by our sister institution, AUD NEPAD. Given the wealth of work that has been done under that program, it would be important, I assume, for AMA to want to establish relationships with the AMRH program.
Thank you very much. And probably the last question is to look at industry. As you know, the African pharmaceutical industry has been quite vociferous during the pandemic, and similarly, there are calls for other structures and opportunities to participate. What's the role you envisage for industry in this? How should they be working?
Well, I think Africa pharmaceutical industry, which is doing a good job and serving the continent, should be very interested in having strong relationship with the AMA, given that it will be good for their products, be it medicines, medical devices, technologies, you name it. Because AMA is going to be the centralized agency, and everybody would want to obtain the regulation certificate or green light from AMA for their products. So I would want to believe that they should also be extremely excited about the birthing of AMA. What happens actually, the devil always will be in the detail. I know that those who are not working up to standards certainly would not be excited about AMA if AMA is, once AMA rises to the occasion. So I don't see this from where I sit now as a challenge. And I'm sure that the appropriate and strong partnerships shall be established between the two.
Okay, so sorry to detain you a little bit longer, because very interesting 2 questions. The first question was, how ready are the national competent authorities, scientific expert communities, to now engage with AMA? And then the second one is, how do you see herbalists engaging with this? Because I think, as you see, African medicine has got many rules to it. How do you see it? Because there is a provision in the treaty to look at traditional medicine. How the two looked onto, yeah.
Well, again, just the mere fact that in less than 3 years, we already have 22 ratifications deposited and some on the way. Indeed, this morning we have another member state which is will be at the commission to sign onto the treaty, which will almost bring it to about 30 who have signed and 22 that have deposited their treaty of ratification, which is a clear demonstration that all these member states and their national agencies are interested in the AMA. And one of the AMA is intended to collaborate and support the national regulatory agencies, not to compete with them, not to squeeze them out, but to establish a collaborative relationship. So there's a clear, not only political will, but actually at the very practical and operational level, will to engage and one, to establish AMA and to enter into relationships with AMA. Regarding the question on traditional medicine, you're right, it's in the treaty, it's one of the functions. And as you may already know, some member states have integrated traditional medicines into their national policy and programs. Again, it should provide the opportunity for those who are practicing traditional medicines and opportunity and space for them to also be catapulted upfront and within the health system of national of member states, in order that they can also have a place to operate under appropriate regulations and be properly regulated. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. To the rest of the questions that have been asked, we will address those separately. I think we will ask again Margaret to help us. But just as a thank you note, I think Greg Perry, the Deputy Director IFPMA, could say a few words to thank Margaret, and we can then move on. Greg, are you on?
Yes, and by the way, Margaret, it's lovely to see you after such a long time. I hope we can see one another in person. Yeah, just to say, and you were mentioning it from the industry perspective, we are fully dedicated to the establishment of AMA. I mean, we set up AMATA with IAPO, and we're particularly interested to see in the next steps how things can progress, the governance, the financing. But also, as we start developing the system, I think it is very important that we can have industry fully involved in the consultation process, because as we did in the establishment of the European system and of the EMA, there was a very strong dialogue between the EMA and the heads of agencies from the national networks in the development of the new systems. The industry has strong scientific experience of, operational regulatory experience, and will be the principal users of the system. So what is, vitally important is to have that. And for us as an industry, those producing innovative products, those producing established or generic products, for us, this is a significant opportunity to accelerate access, to ensure a greater safety, efficacy, and quality of medicines on the continent, to combat counterfeit products. But one of the things I think, and you've mentioned this before, Margaret, in another event it is important to manage expectations, because sometimes a lot of people think it will be an identical copy to the EMA. It isn't. It's much more of a reliance-based, sort of mutual recognition-based, and a lot of important issues around, harmonizations around guidelines and processes. It's not a centralized procedure, but it's absolutely fundamental that the EMA is established, and it will provide a sort of a twin with the African CDC, if I can put it that way, because the African CDC has provided such amazing leadership through the African Union during the pandemic, and to have another African institution working together in line for public health for citizens in Africa, I think is fundamental. So we're fully with the AMA, and we're fully with you in its progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Margaret, we will extend another invite to you at our Global Patients Congress in Oman in October, where we hope to host African members, our members there, and have an African meeting on the agenda. And I hope we'll have the new director of the agency invited to that meeting. I'm very hopeful in October we'll have everybody in place, and it'll be great. So thank you very much for your time, and please carry on that hard work. And thank you for your service, as I would say, during the pandemic. It was absolutely essential. Thank you, Margaret. And
thank you very much. I wish you well with the rest of the webinar. And Greg, don't worry, you're speaking to the converted, and I'm sure all shall be well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Paloma, you want to say something now?
Yes, thank you very much, Kawaldip, and thank you, Dr. Margaret, for having giving us your time and for your wisdom regarding the process, the AMA process, and we wish you all success. Your success is our success. So thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you. Now, Kawaldip, we will proceed with our private meeting of the steering committee, or would you like to go over the questions that have been maybe?
Yes, I think as you said, there were very, very important questions. The first question, I think, is very inspirational. That you know, this is our institution. I was listening into the eulogies being paid to ex-President Moi Kibaki from Kenya, who passed away recently. God rest his soul in peace. And one of the things that was coming through there was that some of the human rights lawyers and others were saying that he was a man who believed in institutions. And that's something that really hit me hard, because I think that's what we need now in Africa. You know, we need these institutions out there, institutions that make room for us, enable us to discuss each, so that your Ethiopians can talk to Kenyans, to talk to Somali, to talk to guys from Burundi, and we don't have that level of the otherness that we always seem to develop, and we can then work together on that. And these institutions, as a pandemic preparedness, are important. Now, there's some questions we can't answer because they're confidential, in that who are the 8 candidates for hosting? This is like the Olympics, you know, that everybody puts in a bid to host. I know that in the press you might have seen a number of countries. I wouldn't speculate on those, but as you say, each of those bids is a sealed bid. And it's important for it to be opened and then discussed. I think this is like knowing the baby's gender, you know. Let's wait for the baby to turn up, you know. Then we'll be all surprised whether it's pink or blue. Then again, somebody here again suggested something very important, I think, was that how will fight the fakes issue be dealt in the continent? And I think this is something that's absolutely important right now. One of the failures of controlling fake drugs has been that there was no oversight or no cross-border institution we could rely on. And this really helps us in that it will give us one organization that, together with CDC, I suppose, or second Pan-Africa, would have some clout and some power and have an oversight. And I think something that somebody mentioned earlier again in a comment was that both will improve the decision-making capacity of the African Union. Yes, we agree with you on that. There are some more issues there on the again on some looking at whether veterinary health and others will be incorporated. I think that is out of the scope at the moment, but I think you're right. One Health is an approach Africa and others are joining in. I think especially in AMR, antimicrobial resistance, there are means of looking at both the veterinary, human and plant medicines to be looked into one sector. Then again, here's something about the innovation. I think, yes, that one of the advantages, as you said, during the pandemic, the first companies that broke the records, in innovation and that, were all from the European Union. And say like BioNTech and AstraZeneca, even though Britain says we were outside the European Union, but much of the infrastructure that these universities had and this research center was developed through that European Union programs. There were Health 2020, there were other programs that were combined, national researches and European researches. And these innovative companies like Roche as well for the diagnostics, without which we wouldn't have gone any further. Those diagnostics are still biomarkers, genomes. And that's, I think, what we see here coming with this agency, that once we start working and this agency starts strengthening our individual, national, local, and then regional industry relationships, it will attract more investment, it will attract more innovation from our own individuals. I don't see why biochemists from African universities have to go seek work elsewhere. We will have an opportunity for them as well to work within the African continent. It will start developing centers of excellency, I think, which we need now. The rest, I think, if you follow that treaty, we have given you the link of the treaty as well. It's fully there. Also read about Entebe's statement, which we made in Kampala in 2017, which sort of highlights what the need is. And then again, from our own aspect, if you want to continue further development, please join us. We put a link in there for you to join us. It's free. It's a wonderful alliance to join, and it gives you quite insight. And as I said, one of my pet projects now is that at our Global Patients Congress in 1st to 3rd October in Oman, with the Omani government's participation through what they have a project in Africa. As you know, Oman had significant presence in East Africa for a long time. We are trying to host a session there for our African members to sit in and discuss. And that session will probably have the European Medicines Agency present as well to discuss how we take forward this. Now, the ratification, now somebody's really put a good comment there. Who are important and what is needed. And I think it's very important to look at the big five, as I said, and I'm glad to see Professor Amani from Al-Azhar University up in Egypt here with us as well. The five that we think, the big five, the kind of wish list of every tourist who comes to visit our glorious game parks to see those big five, is that we need, I would say the rhino is the big one, Nigeria. It's a very big economy. And then the leopard, which is the most elusive and most exciting creature to look, is South Africa, because it always surprises you. The leopard is a non-standard feline cat, and you never underestimate it. And South Africa is a time to now influence that. So that's our second. We need them to ratify and deposit. Then I think if you look at Kenya, I think from Kenya, from 2 points of view, that it has been stable in the region for a long time, and it has got a good link into infrastructure around it. It has some of the international agencies there and has a good experience in conferences. And then I think Ethiopia is very important for us for one particular reason, and I think that is that it hosts the AU, and also as from a moral perspective, it's just like the Olympics. The Olympics can't be without Greece. If you watch the Olympics, Greece always walks in first, because Ethiopia, as one of the nations that remained independent in Africa, has its own script, its own religious order. It has its own development. Historically, it has been amazing beacon for Africa. Without Ethiopia ratifying and joining us, it's like having Greece, not having Greece in the Olympics movement. So I will urge the Ethiopian government to please come in. And lastly, I think I call it the continent, the country of sorrows for a long time is DRC. Here is a huge country, great potentials, great riches. And I think for a tragedy, it has suffered so much tragedy. But we do need DRC. If DRC can ratify and deposit, it will make the full member, the big five. If these come in, then I think there is nothing to stop this bulldozer. And I think we will have an agency at the earliest. And I hope so by October, we have it all in the bag, and we can all be marking this in Oman, our Global Patients Congress. I will leave the other questions, we will capture them and put the vital answers on our website. And I will now pass on to Paloma again to conclude this, and then we will move on to the private meeting. Paloma?
Yes, thank you everyone for having joined us. We had more than 40 people on this call, and I really thank you for having joined. I apologize, Dr. Margaret had to leave a little before the time that had been assigned to her. She had an urgent meeting to attend, but I think she gave us an overall message of and a good sign of where the direction of the operationalization of the agency is going. So we are very encouraged by her words, and I think we need to keep a close eye on developments on the next steps, the process, which will be the Convention of State Parties coming up in May, and then the designation of the Director General in, I believe, July. So at least we'll keep you updated on all those developments, and we will have another one of these webinars with another guest speaker in July.
And just to reinforce what Paloma said, these webinars will be a permanent feature from now on. This is something that we have also in the European Medicines Agency, where the patient consumer working parties have continuous webinars. We call them roll-on, roll-off, meaning every quarterly or frequency we can determine. We hold the webinar to update what's happening within the European Medicines Agency, so similar with the African Medicines Agency, anything that we have to look out for, what's happened, what's going on, alert. And I think as part of the pandemic preparedness approaches as well, this will be a great network to carry on that development and looking. And lastly, at the tail end, so we have the WHO's regional committee meeting at which we will meet again. And also I would like to meet at the WHO's AMRO meeting. I think this is something we have to combine and balance, that Africa is still split between two regions in the WHO infrastructure. So we will meet in Cairo, and we'll meet somewhere, hopefully in Brazzaville or wherever the meeting is. Thank you very much. And Paloma, the instructions are those who remain now, and those who have to leave could leave. Is that correct?
Yes. The webinar has ended now. And
okay, thank you, Achike. Thank you. So the webinar concludes now, and please do have a good day and keep supporting us, and we'll help you as well along with your questions. And let's see how far we can take this and carry on building that institution. Thank you.